Hello and welcome to Wyrd Wessex. I'm Andy.
And I'm Craig.
So, Craig, what mysteries have you unearthed for us today?
Well, a friend of mine shared a story that genuinely unnerved her. So much so that she felt a real sense of unease just by bringing it to my attention. Almost like somehow by bringing it to my attention, she would upset this thing.
The thing. Well, the thing about the thing is, Craig.
No, I'm going to have to stop you there, mate. It's not the thing from Warminster. This is a little bit more northerly.
In that North Wessex.
Yeah.
So, Yorkshire?
Keep going.
We're not doing the Falkirk Triangle again. You know how the rabbit hole goes.
Look. This is going to be a long record, mate. Let's just say it's located on Ben Macdhui, or Macduff's Mountain. It's the second highest peak in Scotland and all of the British Isles after Ben Nevis, the monarch of the Cairngorms. Its summit reaches a lofty 1,309 metres, and it's a proper Munro.
It doesn't sound particularly spooky or weird so far. I mean, majestic perhaps, but what's the fear surrounding it?
Well, it's not the mountain in itself, but what's there. In 1961, in Scotland's magazine, Ronald W. Clark, a notable mountaineering historian, wrote, "Looking across to these slopes on a fine day, it is difficult to appreciate how they can have come by their reputation as the haunt of Britain's only mountain ghost." So yeah, today we're talking about Am Fear Liath Mòr, the big grey man of Ben Macdhui. Legend has it that this entity haunts the summit and high passes of the mountain, and you know, there's a poem by Mr. Duffy called Fear Liath Mòr, which, just a note here, is actually an anglicised version I was told not to use, but for the sakes of the poem's title, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
The poem really captures the essence of this whole mystery right from the start. What is this thing which haunts the cold grey mists above Macdhui's frowning cliffs? Is it some great phantom of an ageless giant which no man can face? What is it that sounds above the echo of human footsteps to make the climber pause and listen, yet fear to look back? Is it the ghost of our inner self, set free on some wild flight of fantasy? No one knows. The secret is kept in the bosom of the hills.
Wow. I mean, that sets the scene, doesn't it? Sort of fear to look back. That's always sort of an unnerving bit. But it's not just poetic fancy, though, is it? People reported some seriously unsettling encounters up there.
The most famous account comes from a highly respected mountaineer and scientist, Professor J. Norman Collie, back in 1891, although he didn't publicly discuss it until 1925.
That's quite a delay between 1891 and 1925. So what took him so long?
Well, Collie was a highly respected figure, not the type to invent tales of mountain monsters. Perhaps he hesitated to share such a bizarre experience for fear of damaging his reputation. It wasn't until he spoke to the Cairngorm Club that his account became widely known.
And Professor J. Norman Collie wasn't just some casual hill walker. He wasn't just a scientist. He was a pioneering mountaineer, a distinguished chemist, and a fellow of the Royal Society. This is a man of keen scientific observation and rational thought. In fact, it's even been suggested that his sharp intellect and meticulous nature may have influenced Conan Doyle in his creation of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Collie was a leading figure in the golden age of alpinism, tackling some of the most challenging peaks in the Himalayas, including attempts on Nanga, Parbat and K2. For someone of his stature and experience to be genuinely terrified by something he couldn't identify speaks volumes about the power of the encounter. He said, "I was returning from the cairn on the summit in a mist when I began to think I heard something else than merely the noise of my own footsteps. Every few steps I took, I heard a crunch and then another crunch, as if someone was walking after me, but taking steps 3 or 4 times the length of my own. I said to myself, this is all nonsense. I listened and I heard it again and could see nothing in the mist. As I walked on and the eerie crunch sounded behind me, I was seized with terror and took to my heels, staggering blindly among the boulders for 4 or 5 miles, nearly down to Rovimercus Forest. Whatever you make of it, I do not know, but there is something very queer about the top of Ben Macdhui, and I will not go back there again." And Collie wasn't alone. Over the years, numerous other climbers have reported similar experiences, a palpable sense of presence, the distinct sound of giant footsteps echoing in the mist, and sometimes even a fleeting glimpse of a tall, shadowy figure. Some describe it as being over 10 feet tall, gaunt, with long limbs and dark hair. A proper mountain phantom, I'd say.
Yeah, we also have the intriguing accounts of Peter Densham, a very experienced and level-headed mountaineer who led aeroplane rescue work in the Cairngorms during the Second World War. This wasn't someone prone to flights of fancy. He had two very strange encounters on Ben Macdhui that deeply affected him. The journalist J.W. Herries interviewed him in about these in 1949, and Densham's stories were remarkable. On one occasion, around the end of May 1945, Densham climbed to the summit on a perfectly clear day. He was enjoying the views, as so often happens in the Cairngorms. A thick mist suddenly rolls in. He finds himself alone in this silent, eerie world. Now, he'd heard stories of the Grey Man, but just dismissed them. He was even scoffing at the idea that he could drive people to their deaths over Lurcher's Crag, a 1,053-metre high summit. He started hearing strange noises then, but he put it down to the rocks. He was eating his lunch when suddenly he had that unsettling feeling mountaineers sometimes get, that someone's nearby, something's going on. He didn't think much of it initially, but then he felt a cold pressure on the back of his neck, even though his hood was down. Standing up, he heard a crunching noise from the direction of the cairn. He went to investigate, and he said that even as he approached the sound, he still wasn't frightened. But suddenly, then, he was overcome by an intense apprehension, a desperate urge to just get off the mountain. He found himself running at an incredible pace, and terrifyingly, he realised he was heading straight for Lurcher's Crag. He said he felt like something was pushing him. He fought to change direction, eventually managing to veer off towards the Larry Gru. He didn't stop running until he was miles away, past Glenmore.
And he had another bizarre experience during the war while on a mountain rescue with a friend, Richard Frere. They were searching for a crashed plane on Brai Riach, but they ended up on Ben Macdhui. They reached the summit cairn around 4 p.m. After a while, Densham was surprised to hear Frere seemingly talking to himself, or so he thought. Then he got the impression Frere was talking to someone on the other side of the cairn. He went around and found himself joining in the conversation. He described it as a strange, almost psychic experience. They both talked to someone invisible for some time, and the really odd thing was that afterwards, neither of them could remember what the conversation was about. They suddenly just realised they were alone.
Densham himself believed that both experiences were fundamentally psychic, an effect of the undefined properties of the mountain itself on his consciousness. Even though he was on Ben Macdhui many times after these incidents and experienced nothing similar, he always maintained that it was a terrifying place to be alone or in winter, calling it the most mysterious mountain I have ever been on.
Building on Densham's unsettling experiences, we also have another account by Richard Frere, who contributed an article to a now defunct periodical called Open Air in 1948. He described his encounter as mainly personal, impressionistic, and possibly psychic in origin. Interestingly, he had explored the Cairngorms extensively for 10 years. Yet this was the only time he ever felt truly oppressed by something. He mentioned that on this particular occasion, his mind was perhaps more open to the possibility of a metaphysical phenomena on the high plateau of Ben Macdhui. As he walked up through the forest of Rothimercus and towards Larry Gru Pass, he found himself thinking about the very tales we're discussing: the slow footsteps, the fleeting shapes, the echoing voices, even the idea that sober scientific minds had spoken of the spectral grey man came to him. He sat down on a rock contemplating the bleak beauty of Lurcher's Crag when suddenly his mind became absorbed in a train of thought so weird and disagreeable that he had to physically get up and move on to try and regain his mental balance. But a deep depression and intense apathy clung to him. He even questioned whether he should continue, despite it being a perfect, joyful day. He described the bleakness of the Larrig summit fastening upon him like a net, and the pools of D seemingly to glare at him like angry eyes. He felt utterly alone, yet not alone. He said, Very close to me, permeating the air, which moved so softly in the summer's wind, there was a presence. Utterly abstract, but intensely real. This unseen companion stayed with him as he crossed the rocky terrain towards the March burn. Then high above the pass, just below the edge of the burn, something else manifested. He'd probably been aware of it subconsciously for a while, but it suddenly struck him. An intense, high, singing note, just within the range of hearing, that never rose or fell. He initially thought it might be the pressure of his ears, but simple tests ruled that out. He felt the sound was coming from the very soil of the mountain.
I mean, that changes it, doesn't it? Like, footsteps, heavy footsteps and shadowy figures is one thing, but ethereal music from the very mountain itself. Wow.
Yeah, he reached the summit cairns hours later, still accompanied by this metaphysical presence and the thin whine of the music. As evening approached and he descended back towards Lurcher's Crag, the music faded. But the abstract presence felt like it was clinging to him, desperately wanting to leave the mountain, but bound to it by some powerful force. Then suddenly, it was gone, leaving him with a momentary flash of terror before a sense of relief washed over him as he reached the woodland path.
And what was his conclusion?
He ends his account by saying that this only happened once in all his years exploring the Cairngorms. He challenged enlightened materialists to explain it away as relaxed eardrums or an overactive imagination, but he himself remained unconvinced. He invited others to experience the mountains at dusk to perhaps understand that fear without a name, that intense dread of the unknown.
And the unsettling encounters on Ben Macdhui don't end with Collie and Densham. We also have a rather extraordinary account relayed by Richard Frere about a friend of his. This individual, on the strength of a wager, was determined to spend a January night alone besides the massive cairn on Macdhui's summit.
Yeah, I mean, like a January night, that's some serious commitment, right?
Yeah, I mean, just without the, sort of scary stuff on there, it's a cold night on a mountain.
Yeah.
He arrived in the shuddering cold of the evening, pitched his tent, and had one last strong cup of tea. He later revealed that almost immediately he was struck by a strange sense of unreality and a morbidly analytical train of thought. He questioned his very presence there. He tried to focus on his surroundings, the tent, his sleeping bag, the stove, all sort of physical things, solid things, but he just couldn't shake this feeling. Outside, the moonlit landscape was stark and broken, seemingly inert, yet surging with this elemental power. He became acutely aware of the cold stars above and felt a profound sense of rejection. He wasn't delusional, he said, but the terror that gripped him was about the impending impact of a knowledge that would forever set him apart. It was as if he was unwillingly receiving a flood of new, revolutionary thoughts from a powerful mind, a mind that was neither human nor anti-human, just utterly indifferent from his. Somehow, despite all of this, he managed to fall asleep, his mind just tiring, unable to cope any longer with all this information and feelings flooding in. But the rest was brief, and it led to an even more terrifying awakening. He awoke with his eyes fixed and staring, his scalp prickling, cold shivers running down his spine. He tried to move his legs, but they remained rigid, obeying some subconscious command just to stay still. A long beam of moonlight streamed in through a crack in the tent's fly sheet, illuminating the far wall. He found himself staring intently at this patch of light. Then, the edge of the moonbeam began to blur, turning brownish. He knew something was between him and the moon. In that moment, he said he no longer felt human. He became this hunted animal, instinctively trying to press himself down into the earth to be unseen. He even thinks his breathing stopped as ancient survival instincts kicked in, seeking total concealment in the face of this extreme danger now looming over him. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the danger passed. The moonbeam became pure white again, and the brown shadow receded and disappeared.
So what did he make of the shadow?
Well, when he recounted this to Frere soon after, he was still in such shock that Frere was initially sceptical about the rest of the story, suggesting it could have been the extreme stress and the terror of those first hours in the tent overwhelming his normally quite logical mind. His friend didn't argue, which makes what he thought he saw next even stranger. As soon as the brown stain left the tent wall, He said life returned to his limbs. He sprang up and threw open the tent fly sheet. The night was brilliant above him. About 20 yards away, he was curiously certain of the distance here. 20 yards away, he saw a great brown creature swaggering down the hill. He used the word swaggering because it had an air of insolent strength and rolled slightly from side to side as it took huge, measured steps. He describes it as covering shortish, definitely brown hair with a disproportionately large head and very thick, powerful neck. Despite the width of its shoulders suggesting a male form, he said it didn't resemble an ape. Its long, hairy arms weren't untidy, so its posture was quite erect and upright.
Yeah, tall, brown, swaggering creature. I mean, that's quite a departure from the grey, shadowy depictions that we've had so far.
Yeah, it is highly improbable, as Freyr noted himself. And the friend of his saved the most unbelievable detail for last. He claimed this creature was at least 20 feet in height, and even tried to use basic trigonometry to prove it. The night's experience was so harrowing that he felt sick the next morning. He tried to rationalise what he'd seen. Perhaps a fellow climber, misinterpreting sounds and shapes in his disoriented state. He even considered thick clothing creating the illusion of a large neck on this climber coming up. But despite these attempts at logic, he remained unconvinced. Driven by curiosity, he emerged from the tent and searched from the area. Driven by curiosity, he emerged from the tent and searched the area where the creature had been, looking for footprints. But he found nothing unusual on the rocky ground. He clearly recalled the creature's immense size, the way it moved, and its brown hair. He later explained to Freyr his attempts to calculate the creature's height. He remembered its head being just above the horizon. Then, seeing his ice axe, which was just over 3 feet long, standing near the boulder where the creature disappeared, he made a visual comparison to the horizon. Based on this, he concluded the creature must have been between 24 and 30 feet tall. Freyr, who knew the mountains and his friend well, personally had no doubts about his sincerity.
So we've heard about footsteps and terrifying feelings, even those massive figures, but the descriptions really vary, and some are just as unsettling, perhaps even more so, because they happen to people who had no idea what they were walking into. Take Wendy Wood, for instance. In her book The Secret of Spey, she tells this story from her time on Ben Macdhui, completely unaware of any of the other encounters at the time. She describes a dull day with light snow. She stopped in the entrance to the pass, satisfied to stop here for the time being to admire the view. Suddenly came a harsh, booming voice beside her, which she described as having the harsh consonants of Gaelic. Checking the immediate surroundings for anything, a fallen person, a deer barking, but nothing. And that's when anxiety took over and she made the decision to move on. But as she did, she heard the distinct sound of footfall behind her. Counting the seconds between footfalls, she ruled out the sound of her own feet. And the big grey man isn't always described as wholly human-shaped either. Joan Grant describes a pleasant, leisurely stroll leading to sheer terror and panic-fueled running to get away from something utterly malign, four-legged, yet obscenely human, invisible, yet solid enough to hear the pounding of its hooves. She had the distinct feeling, if it had reached her, she would die. Tom Crowley also described being seized with terror as he turned to see an undefined misty figure with pointed ears, long legs and feet with talons that appear more like fingers than toes.
Oh, that is wild. Pointed ears and talons. So it's not just a big grey bloke then?
No, definitely not always grey or even human in shape, it seems.
There's another account by a Dr. Am Kellis. Now, Dr. Alexander Mitchell Kellis was a seriously accomplished man. We're talking this Scottish chemist, mountaineer, explorer. He was really into the physiology of high-altitude climbing and even did some pioneering work on oxygen use on the mountains. He was even part of an early expedition to Everest and tragically actually died in 1921 during a British Mount Everest reconnaissance expedition. So my point is, this isn't just some casual sort of hill walker. But get this, on a clear June night, after he'd been chipping away at some crystals near the summit cairn. He was up there on Ben Macdhui with his brother. His brother was sitting right by the cairn, and Kellis was just a little bit away. But then suddenly he sees this figure climb up out of the Larrigou Pass, wander right over around the 10-foot tall cairn, and then just disappear back into the pass. Now, back then, it would have been pretty weird to find anyone up there alone that late. But what really blew Kellis away was how huge this thing was. He said it was basically the same height as the 10-foot cairn itself. Now, when Kellis went back to his brother, he was like, "Who on earth was that person walking around the cairn?" And his brother replied, "What are you talking about? I didn't see anyone."
So, Andy, with all these wild stories from the giant footsteps to invisible conversations and figures towering over cairns, what do you even call this thing? Is the big grey man even a man, or is it something else entirely?
Well, I mean, Craig, that's a good question, isn't it? That is the question. It definitely seems like the descriptions are all over the place, don't they? It makes you wonder if it's one thing or a whole bunch of weirdness or other things or a tribe of things, going back to the thing. But just all this weird stuff sort of converging on Ben Macdhui itself. I mean, some people have even described seeing the devil himself up there.
Whoa. Hold on. The actual devil, like horns and a pitchfork?
Yep, the whole shebang. Well, not quite. But definitely something terrifying and, something what we'd call conventionally demonic. So, back around 1914, a well-known lawyer from Aberdeen called George Duncan was a proper respected guy and a veteran mountaineer who knew the Cairngorms inside out. He was climbing with a friend from the Scottish Mountaineering Club. They'd been on the mountains all day and were driving back from Derry Lodge in a dog cart at dusk. Duncan was at the back facing the mountains, just sort of chilling out. All of a sudden, he gets the shock of his life. He sees this tall figure in a black robe, like the conventional figure of the devil himself, waving his arms with the long, dangly sleeves right at him, sort of devil meets death, He said he got such a shock that he felt a cold shiver run down his spine, something he'd never experienced before or since. The dog cart turned a corner and it was gone. Interestingly, there was another report to add to that from 1926 that adds a little detail. Duncan apparently said the figure he seemed to see was surrounded by smoke. Walter Reed, another guy who knew the Cairngorms like the back of his hand, told a newspaper in 26 that he knew of two more mountaineers who claimed to have encountered the devil descending Ben Macdhui. So this wasn't just Duncan.
Okay, so it sounds like Ben Macdhui isn't just home to the big grey man, but also potentially a full-on demonic entity for some folks. But it gets even weirder, right? Like, this next one sounds almost like a time slip or something.
You do love a time slip.
I do. So Frank S. Smythe or Smith?
I was going to say Smythe.
Frank S. Smythe was one of the greatest mountaineers of the 20th century. He wrote a book called The Mountain Vision, and an experience he had in the Highlands sparked a whole bunch of letters to the editor in The Scotsman back in 1941 because it was so relevant to the Ben Macdhui mystery. He'd seen all sorts of strange things on mountains before, but this was one of the weirdest. He was crossing the hills from Moravik to Loch Dewey on a bright, sunny day. Everything was beautiful, cloud-dappled hills, distant blue sea, nothing sinister.
Sounds like a lovely hike so far.
Yeah, right. But then as he crossed a ridge and dropped into this sunny, grassy little defile, he suddenly felt this intense aura of evil. He said it was like something terrible had happened there, and the atmosphere just lingered. And it actually intrigued him so much that he decided to just sit there and have lunch, try and figure out what was oppressing him. As he was chilling, smoking his pipe, this evil atmosphere just pressed in harder and harder. He tried to clear his mind to be open to whatever strange influence was there.
Sorry, it's just I like that this aura of evil, and like the reaction is, "What? This is so evil and oppressive. I simply must have my lunch here and figure out what it is." I mean, the balls on that, I'm gonna smoke my pipe, have my lunch, and sit in this aura of evil to work out what's going on. They don't make them like they used to.
Yes, Andy. Yes, I see. I
So
forgot I had
what?
that up there.
You need to bring that with you if we go to some haunted place. Sit there with your bacon sarnie and your pipe.
On the road trip.
There you go. So what happened next?
He had a vision, or, what some skeptical folks would call a hallucination. He saw a score or more of ragged people, men, women, children, straggling through the defile, looking super weary, like they travelled forever. And as this pitiful procession was in the middle of the defile, suddenly from both sides, hidden men leaped out. They were brandishing spears, axes, and clubs, rushing down with wild yells onto the unfortunates beneath.
This is sort of a proper massacre he was witnessing in this vision then.
Yeah, a short, fierce struggle, then a horrible massacre. Not one person left alive. The defile was just choked with corpses. Smythe said he got out of there as fast as he could, saying as he ran,
"The screams seemed to din my ears."
He said he felt like he'd been given a
backwards glimpse into a blood-stained page of Highland history.
He claims he knew nothing about the history of the area. He even wrote to the editor of the Scotsman asking if anyone had information about a massacre there, because he truly believed it was a genuine physical experience.
So did he get any replies? Did anyone sort of confirm there was a massacre there or anything like that?
There was. He learned that a massacre did take place on the road between Moravik and Glenglomac, either in 1715, when General Wade ambushed Highlanders, or after Culloden in 1746. He still doubted if his experience was exactly that event, because he saw it happen on the ridge, not the road, and the weapons he saw looked older. But the fact that there was a historical massacre in that general area just adds another layer of bizarre reality to his vision.
So it seems there is more to Ben Macdhui than just the big grey man and variants of the grey man.
It definitely seems so, yeah.
So, speaking of what this thing might be, there is a fascinating tradition collected by renowned ornithologist and naturalist Satan Gordon, who was writing back in 1941. He knew the Cairngorms with a real intimacy, digging into local traditions. He wrote that some old-timers beneath the Cairngorms still believe the big grey man was actually the ghost of William Smith, the Cairngorm poet, whose songs are still sung there. One local saw the spectre described a cold, stormy day with snow squalls. As he crossed the plateau, a man of greyish complexion was following him. The weirdest part, he was in his shirt sleeveless, with no coat on him, despite the bitterly cold weather. When the witness reached the edge of Corian Nectar, the mysterious figure just disappeared. The only really unsettling thing in all this was his strange dress for a snowy day and his sudden, uncanny vanishing act.
Wow, that's a specific ghost. So William Smith, the Cairngorm poet, just wandering around in his shirt sleeves on a freezing day. It's definitely a peculiar spin on the big grey man. Yeah, not everyone who saw the big grey man ran in fear. There was a case in the June 1958 issue of the Scots magazine from Alexander Tweenian, a mountaineer with heaps of experience, a naturalist and a photographer. He described an encounter with the grey man, and get this, he called it the most outstanding experience of his mountaineering life. That was the day he shot the Fear Liath Mòr.
He shot it? That's Oh, like he's a photographer, so he shot it, right?
No.
With a gun. He shot it with a gun. That's a new one.
So, in October of 1943, he was on a 10-day leave climbing alone in the Cairngorms, and because rations were tight during the war, he actually carried a revolver to shoot any small game for food. One afternoon, he hit the summit of Ben Macdhui when a really dense mist just rolled in, swallowing the Larrigru and the whole mountain. It got dark and gloomy, and the wind picked up. Thinking a storm was brewing, he started heading down the Cor Edgechan pretty fast, and that's when he heard it. It's an odd sound, like a loud footstep echoing through the mist. Then another, and another, spaced at really long intervals. He wrote,
I am not unduly imaginative, but my thoughts flashed instantly to the well-known story of Professor Collie and Fear Liath Mòr. Then I felt the reassuring weight of the loaded revolver in my pocket. Grasping the butt, I peered about in the mist, here rent and tattered by eddies of wind. A strange shape loomed up, receded, came charging at me. Without hesitation, I whipped out the revolver and fired 3 times at the figure. When it still came on, I turned and headed down the path, reaching Glenderry in a time I have never bettered. You may ask, was it really the Fear Liath Mòr? Frankly, I think it was. Many times since then I have traversed Macdhui in mist, bivouacked on it in the open, camped near its summits for days on end on different occasions, often alone, and always with an easy mind. For on that day I am convinced I shot the only Fear Liath Mòr my imagination will ever see.
Wow, so he actually opened fire on it. That's a pretty intense reaction, isn't it, compared to just running away in terror. The fact that he kept coming as well after being shot at, like a Terminator. They're grey too, well, silver. And at the end of his account is what I find really interesting. He believes he shot the only Fear Liath Mòr my imagination will ever see. It almost sounds like he confronted it, and in doing so, perhaps sort of dealt with it, or at least his version of it in his own mind.
There's also this really strong belief among some Buddhists that Ben Macdhui is home to a particularly holy or perfect being of their faith. Some even believe levitated Tibetan lamas meet in a cave up there to discuss the world's fate. The Countess of Mayo, a mystic and leader of the active Truth Academy in Edinburgh, who Affleck Gray, the author of The Big Grey Man of Ben Macdhui, corresponded with, even told him to
call your book The Golden Big White Men of Ben Macdhui and lift yourself and your readers out of the negative vibrations of fear and terror.
Then there's Captain Sir Hugh Rankin. He was a serious Mahayana Buddhist, even a vice president of the World Buddhist Association, and he had an actual encounter in the Wyrdo Pass. He swore both he and Lady Rankin didn't just see this presence, but actually talked with him. They instantly recognized him as this Bodhisattva, one of the 5 perfected men who guide the world's destinies. He really hated the abominable snowman tag, preferring benevolent snowmen. Their meeting happened during a cycling tour in July. They were struggling with their bikes in the pass, and just after resting at the Pools of Dee, they both felt a presence behind them. They turned, not afraid at all, and recognized him. He was tall, powerfully built, with an olive complexion, long dark hair, dressed in robes and sandals. He spoke to them in Sanskrit, and Sir Hugh replied in Urdu. Lady Rankin even noted beneficent and peaceful rays of light coming from him. He stayed for about 10 minutes, and the whole time they heard a heavenly host of musicians playing faintly, a mix of bagpipes and Eastern instruments. As he vanished, the music instantly stopped.
And that brings us to another wild aspect of these mountains, doesn't it? The strange sounds. It's not just the footsteps or the dread. Sometimes people report hearing actual ghostly music and voices up there. For some climbers who really know high tops, these sounds can be almost exquisite, even soothing. But for others, it's truly unsettling, and some folks never hear them at all. Someone simply known as OLP, who wrote to the Press and Journal back in 49, said that he was sitting by a burn near Loch Arn and clearly heard music and a distinct baritone voice singing. He even recognised the song. He searched around, but there was nobody there. He heard it multiple times over the years. And then there's Hugh D. Welsh, a long-time Cairngorm Club member. He and his brother experienced ghostly music on the high plateau for years. Beautiful, swelling melodies, even indistinct talking and laughing. At first, they tried to explain it as wind whistling through the rocks, creating natural harmonies. But later, Welsh admitted that his explanation fell short, especially as they'd heard it in dead calm conditions as well. He even recounted a terrifying night alone he spent up there in a bothy, where he heard a full-on spectral orchestra, laughter, singing, chanting, organ music, flute, and even bagpipes. He He experienced pure terror before a strange calm fell upon him. Even world-famous naturalist, photographer, and folklorist Satan Gordon, who we mentioned earlier, in 1926 was crossing Ben Macdhui when his friend heard pipe music for about 15 minutes. Gordon noted the strange, almost fey atmosphere of the day too. And more recently, mountaineer Tony Archer Locke, camping in the Cairngorms, reported hearing strange ringing noises like a stonemason striking his tools upon a stone, even distant bells. He also captured animated human conversations on a tape recorder on the Braireoch Ridge, with no visible people around and no crunching footsteps or anything like that, just the voices fading in and out.
That actually reminds me of an experience that me and a friend once had. We were packing up all our stuff. We lived together at the time, be weird otherwise, to move house. And so because we'd moved half the stuff, we were just sat on the floor. And I became aware of something, this maybe music. And the more I focused on it, the more it definitely was music. It almost sounded like orchestral, like a symphony. But as I listened intently, I heard my friend say, "You can hear that too, can't you?" Which is just a very weird experience, because you think,
yeah, absolutely.
"Am I going mad? I can hear this." And then he's like, obviously must have been the look on my face. Was he like, "You can hear it too?" Like, yeah, I don't know. It was weird. Because it almost, the more you tuned into it, it got louder as well, like as if you were tuning into something else.
Iffy, creepy, weird.
Yes, and we won't mention what we were smoking at the time, but yes, when I were a lad. So anyway, one of the explanations for the big green man is actually extraterrestrial, you'll be pleased to know.
Ah, of course it is. So I was in holiday to Scotland from Wales.
I mean, you'd think it would be wild to even suggest that Ben Macdhui is some kind of landing spot for visitors from outer space, right? But believe it or not, some folks are dead serious about it. They're convinced that the mountain is actually an internal home and laboratory for what they call the Great White Brotherhood.
Great White Brotherhood. Sounds like a secret handshake and, I don't know, maybe some racial supremacies involved there, to be honest.
Well, apparently these groups have a surprising number of followers. They've got branches all over the place. The US, Canada, Australia, South Africa, Rhodesia, and Japan. The Aetherius Society kicked off with just a handful of members back in 1954 after a public seance in London. His founder, a guy named George King, who later became the Reverend Dr. George King, was a taxi driver. Apparently, he hadn't had any mystical experiences until he was chosen to be the primary mental channel of the space intelligences. This whole movement was just in Britain until 1958, when Dr. King claimed he actually came face to face with Master Jesus on a hill in North Devon called Holdstone Down.
Wow.
He said a stream of energy blasted through him and into the world, even into the rocks beneath his feet. And just like that, Holdstone Down became a holy mountain, and something they called Operation Starlight began. In his booklet, My Contact with the Great White Brotherhood, Dr. King goes into how he travelled all over the British Isles, across America, Australia, New Zealand and Switzerland, finally finishing his massive task on a reddish-brown rock overlooking the Chamonix Valley in France. He explained he was basically a crucial link between interplanetary intelligence and Earth, allowing these mountains to be charged with cosmic energy. The idea is that anyone who makes a pilgrimage to these sacred places can tap into these energies, as long as they follow the Aetherius Society's practices, of course.
And pledge the low cost of £40 a month, right?
I don't know, maybe. So one of the mountains that they charged was Craig Unleth Chon, the Rock of the Half Dog. Dog in this case apparently is a lurcher. And it's about 3 miles northwest of Ben Macdhui. In 1958, they even painted a holy rock there with the Aetherius Society symbol. And get this, on September 9th, 1961, Dr. King claims he was contacted by a member of the Great White Brotherhood right there. He says he had a unique experience and connection with one of the most important Great White Brotherhood retreats in the world.
When you say retreat, is that like a spiritual spa day for aliens or something? Like, sort of. That's what I'm picturing.
Yes, that's exactly it. You got it in one.
Fantastic.
No, he describes it as a huge dome-shaped auditorium deep inside Ben Macdhui. And it wasn't empty. There were loads of other beings there, some of them tinkering with advanced radionic recording apparatus, stuff way beyond anything we could imagine. And their goal? To make a complete and exact assessment of every religious and spiritual organization on Earth.
Naturally.
Dr. King says this is super important because Earth is on the verge of a cosmic initiation. And when that happens, the records in these archives will show the true worth of every major and minor religion on the planet.
Oh, so that's a lot to take in.
Yeah. So, Randy, after hearing all these bizarre accounts, what are the main ideas out there about what this thing people are encountering even is?
Well, some lean towards the more grounded explanations as a classic Brocken spectre, an optical illusion where your own shadow gets all sort of magnified and spooky looking when it's interacting with mists and cloud, making it seem like this giant sort of disjointed figure. That could definitely explain some of the visual sightings. And, being up there in those harsh, isolated conditions, the wind howling, the cold biting, it can mess with your head. Extreme fatigue, disorientation, or even hypothermia in extreme cases can trigger hallucinations or heightened senses that are a little bit altered.
Yeah, you also have the idea of infrasound. So sound at frequencies so low we can't consciously hear it, but our bodies feel it. Wind blasting over ridges or through certain rock formations can generate infrasound, and exposure to it can cause intense feelings of dread, anxiety, pressure in the chest, visual distortions, even a sense of a presence. It's like a low, terrifying hum the mountain produces.
So it could be a purely physical thing, sort of making people feel all that terror.
Absolutely. But then if you step beyond the purely scientific, some believe it's the very spirit of the mountain itself, a raw, untamed manifestation of the place. Others wonder if it's the ghost of a specific person, as we mentioned earlier, like the Cairngorm poet William Smith. And of course, given some of these wild physical descriptions, like the 20-foot tall brown creature or the pointed ears and talons, people also toss around the cryptid idea, right? I mean, it's like a Scottish Bigfoot, maybe?
Yeah, and then you dive into the really weird stuff, like theories about ley lines, even interdimensional beings trying to explain the truly inexplicable bits, like the psychic connections, the invisible conversations, the time slip massacre, or how it all just sort of vanishes into thin air after people see it. There's also that wild thought that Ben Macdhui could just be a thin place, one of those places where the veil between the two worlds, like this world and the other world, is just a bit more permeable, allowing things to cross over. And let's not forget the Arthurian Society's belief in the Great White Brotherhood and their secret alien lab deep inside the mountain, of course.
Yeah, but here's the really standout point, the one that makes me properly scratch my head. Almost every single one of these accounts comes from some seriously seasoned climbers. We're talking about people who've scaled peaks all over the world, the Himalayas, the Alps, you name it. They've faced all kinds of conditions, all sorts of challenges.
So, yeah, these aren't just folks who are getting spooked and discombobulated by a weird shadow they see on their first hill walk, are they?
Precisely. They've been in high remote places countless times. But the only place they report these profoundly unsettling, often terrifying, and sometimes physically felt encounters is on Ben Macdhui. It's like whatever the big grey man is, it's tied to that specific mountain. Whether you put that down to something paranormal, psychological, environmental, or even cosmic, it's unique to that very spot. I mean, what do you think?
Um, so, a few ideas. My logical brain is basically saying that it is more that sort of infrasound kind of thing, that whole getting there's a certain rock formation, a certain way the wind hits it that does resonate, and you do combine that with the mist, and it is just one of those places, like they try and replicate in old standing stone circles and tombs like Newgrange, that that sort of sound that just permeates you and just makes you feel like you're experiencing something. Cathedrals are sort of designed that way almost, with the music filling it to just resonate through you and make you feel like, in that case, the Holy Ghost being there. It might just be a natural instance of that. And then folklore gets attached to it, and the more people that know, the more you're likely to see up there. That happens with a lot of things. Um, I kind of like the idea of, as from a folklore perspective, that maybe it's either the Fae, of course. They're not just little sparkly things with wings. They are, sort of grey folk, the other folk. Sort of they're different. They're sometimes big, like weird looking. Um,
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, like Icelandic fairies aren't small, are they? They're like human size.
exactly. And you've got this whole the music thing kind of lends it to that. The idea that
Yeah.
it's the fairy ball, the fairy party sort of thing. Um, Alternatively, maybe it is the going to throw this one out there. Maybe it is some kind of entity from the sort of pre-Christian Celtic pantheon, or spirit of, or gods or goddesses, things like that. Maybe it is literally a figure from that Celtic mythology, for lack of a better term. What about you?
Aliens.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, great, aren't they?
No, no. I almost feel like it could be a combination of things, right? So I think like there probably is some scientific explanation, like you say, these kind of infrasound things probably happen. But I kind of like to think there is some kind of fae or god up there, kind of looking after things. Whether that's wishful thinking, I guess, is
Why is he trying to get people to walk off a mountain though?
sacrifice.
Yeah, maybe. No one's doing
Also,
it
he's
anymore.
not. I mean, people are running from it, right? That's
Yeah,
not
but
meant to be a
there's that
thing.
description of being drawn towards that ledge, isn't there?
Yeah, but then you've got that thing where I think most people get where you're up somewhere high and your mind starts to think about jumping off, right? Is that
I
just me?
mean, yeah, it's no, I get it. It's and it comes back to what we've spoken about before with Bigfoot and other things like that, with um that wild place, that whole untamed wilderness that you're in. And yeah, I personally get it when I go to those places. It's like it feels so desolate and wild and open that you do almost feel like there is a presence there. And maybe that does lend it to be the mountain itself, the very presence of the mountain itself.
Hmm. Would you first would you go up there, maybe daytime, and secondly, would you sleep up there? Because some people have like bivvied up there.
I think I would, but I'd want something sharp and pointy with me. Not that by the accounts of the revolver, but not that that would necessarily do anything. But I think whenever I sleep out in the woods by myself, I tend to have something heavy or pointy with me just in case. So maybe it's not that different, but I think. What about you?
It's a lot of walking.
It is. But I'm thinking maybe one day we should.
Yeah, I mean, I think we almost need someone with more experience to take us, though, right? I mean, this is a serious.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think like uh,
we'll go in optimal conditions.
there isn't on a mountain. The weather conditions change in the summer, even, right?
Um, we will
We
find
need someone
someone.
to take us.
We'll find someone that will go up there with us, leave us there for a bit, but then come and meet us the next day and come down with us.
Yeah, we should find someone. I've got Scottish friends. I'm sure I can find someone that would take us.
Yeah, I've done a bit of the Cairngorms. I've not been to Ben Macdhui. I've been to like Dalwhinnie and sort of like the sort of the edges of it and places like that. But I mean, it's beautiful walking up there. Like, you go walking, you don't see anyone for hours. Um, you
Sounds
know,
like heaven.
right? So yeah, I think that about wraps this up, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing really left to say, I guess, is I haven't referenced kind of the sources for this one,
Oh
which is
yeah,
a
yeah, go
book
for it.
which I actually ended up with two copies of. Yeah. I've used mostly this book, which is by Affleck Gray, I mentioned earlier in the script. The Big Grey Man of Ben Macdhui is what it's called, funnily enough. Actually has two titles. They both have different introductions. So that's the title of that one. And this one's actually The Big Grey Man of Ben Macdhui, Myth or Monster? Yeah, the forwards are different in both of them. But yeah, really interesting read. I've wanted to do that one since I found out about The Big Grey Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those little known but quite terrifying and evocative figures in British folklore.
And I should also quickly say as well, big thanks to Claire Mullin, who was kind enough to send us some pronunciations of some of the Gaelic words and Scottish names. We probably still butchered them, so sorry, Claire. We did our best.
Hopefully slightly less than we would have done left unattended.
Yes, so nobody blamed Claire. It was our fault. We got it all wrong. Yeah, so remember, if you sign up to our Substack, which is at wyrdwessex.co.uk, you get notifications every time we release new content. We don't use it to spam anybody. You just get notifications for new content. And if you pay us a little bit of money, you can help fund the show. And hopefully at some point soon, there'll be some extra content which won't be available elsewhere. We're hoping to do a little road trip. And as we go along, I think we're going to try and do some little bonus. They might only be short videos, just kind of along the trip. But they'll go out exclusively for paying subscribers. Yeah, and obviously follow us on social media, right? At Wyrd Wessex on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I think YouTube's the same. It's at Wyrd Wessex. You can find us. Yeah. I mean, if you're watching this video on YouTube, then that's a weird thing to say, but
you're already there.
You know what they say? Click that bell. And you'll get notifications when we release new episodes. That's the thing.
Exactly. And on that note, thanks for joining us again. And until next time, as always,
stay weird.
Stay weird.